Blog Talk Radio.
Om Shabbat Shalom, Holy Way of the Most High. Om Shabbat Shalom, I sense your presence. Om Shabbat Shalom, Holy Way of the Most High. Om Shabbat Shalom, I sense your presence. I sense your presence. And I am the light within your soul. In the essence of truth and right, love makes the circle whole. And here we stand in line, waiting for some sacred sign. But to find the balance is the purpose of this time. To restore the balance of the universal mind. And in the presence of my Lord of light and love, everything I see aspiring to be free. And when I call to thee, and come on bended knee, surrender to the all-pervading light and love. Reflections of the one surrounding me with love. And I sense your presence. I sense your presence. I sense your presence. I sense your presence. Within and without, above and below, yeah. East, west, north, and south, I sense your presence. Without and within, below and above, yeah. East, west, north, and south, I sense your presence. I sense your presence. Presence of my Lord of light and love, everything I find in tune with the divine. And here we stand in line, waiting for some sacred sign. But to find the balance is the purpose of this time. To restore the balance of the universal mind. And I am the light within your soul. In the essence of truth and right, love makes the circle whole. And when I call to thee, and come on bended knee, surrender to the all-pervading light and love. Reflections of the one surrounding me with love. For to find the balance is the purpose of this time. To restore the balance of the universal mind. And I sense your presence. I sense your presence. I sense your presence. I sense your presence. Om Shabbat Shalom, Holy Way of the Most High. Om Shabbat Shalom, I sense your presence. Om Shabbat Shalom, Holy Way of the Most High. Om Shabbat Shalom, I sense your presence. Om Shabbat Shalom, Holy Way of the Most High. Om Shabbat Shabbat Shalom, holy angel of the Most High. Om Shabbat Shalom, I sense your presence. I sense your presence.
Thank you for joining me here tonight on Activating Compassion in the Midnight Hour. My name is Jessie Ann Nichols George, and I am your hostess. The music you were listening to there at the beginning of the show is I Sense Your Presence. It's by Shemshai. If you'd like to follow any of their tour information or learn more about their music, what's recently been released, you can do so at shemshai.com. And I just want to extend a welcome, whether you are joining us here for the first time or whether you're returning and you've listened to previous shows that I've had on the past. So I definitely appreciate you being here, giving me your support and listening in. Here at Activating Compassion in the Midnight Hour, I look at the different ways that compassion exists in our lives, how to remove our blocks, resistances, frustrations, and more. Some weeks I'm discussing different aspects of how compassion is in our life, how it affects our life, the different areas of compassion. Some weeks I have more exercises and practical implementations in the show. And oftentimes, especially this year, I've got a lot of guests on the show and really wonderful, incredible people like our guest tonight, Paul Tukey. And that way it gives you a chance to learn about other people's work and how their work complements and works with compassion and the things that we can do to develop a more compassionate lifestyle with ourselves, with others, and also with our environment. And I'm highlighting also different musical artists along the way. So Stephen Halpern was on earlier this year. Peter Cater's coming on early August. Both of those were Grammy nominees for Best New Age Artist. And I'm also going to occasionally have a call-in coaching night. So all things to watch for here on the show. And I do in my own work focus on helping people find and use compassion in their everyday lives. I've created the Genesis Clearing Statement, which some of you have experienced on previous shows. Matter of fact, right before I started running my show here, Kevin Barrett, another one of our hosts, did a great interview where we worked with that statement. I can suggest going back and looking at that. That was last year in, I believe it was September 2012. So you can check that out in our archives. I've authored 2 books titled Activating Compassion and Activating Compassion, the Workbook, and I'm just getting ready to release my next set of books, which is based on relationships. So I'm very, very close. I know you've been listening to me say that for a while, but it's very, very close this time, actually. And in addition to that, I've created the Compassion Tour, which is a multi-state nationwide tour, which includes workshops, retreats, seminars, book signings, and fundraising events. And I've actually got a campaign up on Indiegogo right now. You can go in and put in the Compassion Tour, and it will pull that page up, and you can share that with people. You can donate there. It's going to be a really great chance, and that is to help get me out to those fundraisers. And if we exceed our goals on there, if I exceed my goals on there, it does go to the fundraising organization or to the organizations I'm fundraising for. So it's going to go to help a lot of people in that. And then I'm already, like I said, creating a 2013 tour, so looking to do that this fall. You can follow all the events that I have available, whether they're on the tour or not, at jessieannnicholsgeorge.eventbrite.com. And also on there is an option for gifting the tour. So lots of different options to work with that. I've got about 20 events set up for the next couple of months during the summer here. So check those out. Some of those have just a few days left to register for, and other ones you've got about a couple of months to register for those. So lots of exciting things happening. And just a reminder that if you enjoy the show this evening, which I know you're going to because there's going to be some incredible information shared here tonight, make certain that you tell your friends, family, significant others, and all of those social connection buddies that you've got out there, or anybody else that you feel inspired to share it with. They can always listen to it in the archives. And they'll just use the same link to get into the show that you used coming in tonight. Click on, and that will get them right in. They can listen to the show at any point in the archives at their convenience. There's 2 other places they can find our archive shows, by the way. They can go to my webpage, Jessie Ann Nichols George, click my name under the Main Street Universe tab. You'll find the shows archived there, as well as at facebook.com/activatingcompassion/notes. And before we get started, as you know, for those that have listened in before, every week I like to delve into the 72 Names of God, Technology for the Soul. And it's a random opening to a page in this book, and it always provides us with a great message. And this message is also on my page on JessieAnnNicholsGeorge1.com. And then again, if you go into my Main Street Universe page there, you'll click on the tab for me, and this message gets posted every week, usually within 24 hours, oftentimes right after the show. So you can go back and always get this message and review it during the week. And let's see what we've got tonight. The message for tonight is Silent Partner. And that is the name of God that we're working with. And it says here, everyone who comes into this world must choose a silent partner, the dark force or the light of the Creator. Take your pick. And he gives an insight here. And the insight that Yehuda offers is, there are two kinds of wealth, spiritual and physical. How these spiritual and material assets get divided up depends on which silent partner we choose. After all, every partner wants a piece of the action. If we choose the dark force as our silent partner, it will allow us to keep 100% of our material wealth, but it demands 90% of our spiritual light, of which it then tithes 10% back to us in the form of momentary gratification. The dark force then uses the remaining 90% of the light to strengthen itself and wreak havoc in the world and in our personal lives. If we choose the light as our silent partner, we will keep 100% of the light and 90% of the physical wealth. All we must do is tithe 10% back to the light in the form of charity. The concept of tithing, of giving away 10% of our earnings, is also designed to remove the dark force's influence from our lives. If the negative force remains attached to our financial sustenance, eventually its influence will wither away our good fortune. Tithing 10% of our income does not diminish our well-being. On the contrary, it brings greater prosperity and joy in every area of our lives. The silent partner effect means that we always have one side or the other with us. The choice is ours. And I want to mention something in tithing, because I know that for a lot of people, they think, well, shoot, I don't have anything to tithe anymore. I don't have any money left. And for the people that are in that space, remember that when you're giving of your time to charity, when you're giving and assisting other people with things, that also is a form of tithing. So it doesn't always specifically have to be money. That is one form of tithing, but there are also other ways. So if we're saving other people money, that is a way of, it's just as good as tithing money in a lot of ways. So that's something to keep in mind if you really are that tight financially. And the meditation that Yehuda gives here is tithing and meditation upon the sequence of letters removes the dark force's presence from your earnings and its destructive influence from your life. The light is now your silent partner, bringing you endless blessings and protection. It's a partnership made in heaven. And the way that this name is pronounced for silent partner is Yud Resh Tav. Okay, that's Yud Resh Tav. And that is the silent partner. And I think that this is very interesting because our guest tonight has done some incredible things with nonprofit organizations and work that he's come around and given to people. So, definitely he's got that silent partner of the light with him tonight. And I just want to mention as we go into our topic tonight, to give you a little something to think about. When I was younger, there was nothing better than I can remember than, say, rolling around in the grass, playing in fields, and all the wonderful sports that I used to do on the playground. And I can't forget, definitely, as a girl, sitting there making those daisy chains with my friends. The thing is that we never thought about what would happen if we had contact with these beautiful green places. They were a haven for hours of activities. However, were they really safe for us? We've learned that it can easily take 2 to 3 generations of exposure to something before we start seeing genetic effects take place. Every spring, and in some places year-round, people are spraying chemicals and using pesticides to create a beautiful lawn and kill off the so-called weeds, some of which, by the way, are extremely healthy nutrition, unless, of course, you have pesticides all over them. Now, in today's world, we have become much more aware of GMOs and Monsanto, and however, how often are we looking at our own backyard or playground with these things? Chemical sensitivity is on the rise, and is that any wonder? Have you thought about how what you are using on your lawn might be poisoning your beloved cat when they are eating the grass? How about that so-called unexplained rash that your child has on their arms or legs? Paul Tukey made this connection many years ago. When doing landscaping, he discovered that he has seen the consequences of chemical sensitivity arise from the products that he was using. And as a result, he shifted his focus to learning how to create great lawns, play areas, and business spaces organically. His work eventually landed him his own show on HGTV. And chemical sensitivities are a rising concern for many reasons. For many people, they never go away. They're a rising cause for people ending up on disability, which leads to additional repercussions on our greater whole. Many birth or genetic challenges are beginning to be related to this. For example, ADHD, ADD, autism, bipolar disorder, and several more. Children's immunity levels are dropping, leading to more resistant strains of illnesses. So chemical-laden lawn care may also be related to why cancer or other physical issues arise in a large group of children, all from one city or school. The issues are deep, and it seems that it is time that we begin to look at this critical issue. A pretty lawn can be obtained without the use of all of these harsh chemicals and pesticides. Organic landscaping can be just as easy as regular care and provide you with a yard that can really be enjoyed instead of just looking at. And are you really willing to put the lives of your children and pets on the line unnecessarily? How much is a pretty yard worth to you? What are you doing to go green in your yard and with your landscaping? What are you willing to do in order to have safe areas to play in? And how much more could you enjoy your yard, a park, or the landscaping around an office complex if you weren't breathing in and exposed to toxic chemicals? Our guest tonight focuses on a component of compassion that is related to the aspect in my books of creating a new world. And this is where we move beyond just being passionate about something, but move forward in a way that brings consciousness and healing to the world. I'm going to take a short break, and when we return, I'm going to have with me Paul Tukey. He's going to be sharing his work on organic lawn care and landscaping, as well as delving into chemical sensitivities that come from non-organic options. The song I have for you during our break is called Wells Cathedral. It's by Claire Hedin, and if you'd like to find out more about her work or connect more with her music, you can do so at www.clairehedin.com. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes. Welcome back. You are listening to Activating Compassion in the Midnight Hour, and my name is Jessie Ann Nichols George. I am your hostess this evening. You were just listening to a song called Wells Cathedral by Claire Hedin. You can find out more about her work again at www.clairehedin.com. That's spelled CLAREHEDIN.com. And I'd like to bring on my guest tonight, Paul Tukey. He is a journalist, author, filmmaker, TV host, consultant, and motivational public speaker. He has an expertise in environmental issues in landscape management and water quality. He is the winner of the prestigious Horticulture Communicator of the Year Award. Paul has been featured in Good Morning America, CBC in Canada, National Geographic, Reader's Digest, and the New York Times called him the godfather of natural lawn care movement. He had his own cable network TV show on HGTV. He launched Safe Lawns Foundation. He launched People, Places, and Plants, an environmentally oriented media company. He wrote the Organic Lawn Care Manual and co-authored Tag, Toss, and Run, 40 Classic Lawn Games, and started the campaign Lawn Games for Life. Paul produced the award-winning video series Making the Organic Lawn Care Transition. He produced and starred in the award-winning documentary film A Chemical Reaction, and has launched an international consulting firm, Organic Green Pros, to help businesses, municipalities, and others maintain their landscapes naturally. We will be discussing tonight how to take care of your landscaping organically. You can find out more about Paul's work at www.safelawns.org, and you can also go to www.chemicalreactionmovie.com, and that very specifically focuses on the movie A Chemical Reaction, which he created. And I'm going to go ahead and get Paul's mic opened up here. Paul, welcome to Activating Compassion in the Midnight Hour.
Hey, thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure, and I really appreciate you giving us your time because I know you're on the East Coast and it's very late there, and you've had an incredibly long day already, so it's definitely appreciated to have you here.
Yeah, well, it's my pleasure too, and it sounds like you're doing some great work, so I'm happy to be a part of it.
Well, and I think that you're delving into an area that is so very needed. I know my sister is one of those people that has chemical sensitivities, latex allergies, things like that. And every time people are spraying around the neighborhood, they go out and they spray fields even a little ways away. It doesn't even have to be directly across the street. And there's issues going on, and I see it just arise more and more. And I think it's just incredible what you're doing, that you're bringing this awareness out, because this is a way overdue change, I would say. I would love for you to start off by giving people an idea of your background, how you made this transition, because you weren't always doing organic gardening,
right,
or landscaping.
Right. Well, I grew up in the 1960s on a little dairy farm in the state of Maine. And we went, if you look on the map, no matter where you are in the country, you look up in the upper right-hand corner of the United States, and you'll see the state of Maine there. And you go to the top of the state of Maine, you'll see the town of Bangor. And you go north of that, and that's where Bradford, Maine was, where I spent my childhood summers. And it was a long trip in an old truck to get to Bangor, Maine. So we didn't go very often, once every 6 or 8 weeks, for the bare necessities like flour and some beans and some other things that we couldn't raise on the farm. And otherwise, we were totally self-sufficient. And we ate all the things that people consider to be weeds on lawns, things like dandelions and plantain and the wild strawberries and even the clover blossoms. My grandmother would make honey out of those. And so I grew up in that environment where there was kind of a waste not, want not environment. And later on in life, I became a so-called professional landscaper, and I mowed lawns for a living. And people started asking me, how to kill those same dandelions that my grandmother used to eat and force feed to me and tell me they were good for what ails me, because dandelions are one of the most nutritious food on the planet. And I ignored my grandmother's great advice and great wisdom and bought chemical substances at the department store and put them all over customers' lawns because I was making a lot of money in doing so. I built a very large company and made lots of money, but wound up in the hospital with something called acute chemical sensitivity, something like it sounds like your sister might have. And I didn't immediately launch into activism. That came later. But what I did do is to try to figure out alternatives. How can you make a beautiful landscape naturally without all these things like weed and feed and Roundup and just a whole bunch of substances that we now know are just terrible for us? And the evidence is finally coming out after all these years. And so I was fortunate enough to be an active journalist for a newspaper, and I was fortunate enough to have a very successful media company for 15 years, and I had a platform to get the message out there, and I made myself into a somewhat effective public speaker. And so in 2007, we did launch the safelawns.org movement, and I have spent most of the last 7 years on the road spreading this message of lawn care safety, landscape stewardship. And the fundamental message is that there are so many, that is, environmental toxins in the world that we have a very difficult time controlling. But the one thing we can control is what we do in our own backyards, and we can control what we're putting down in the public parks where our children play and where our dogs and cats roam. We certainly ought to be controlling what we're putting down around schools and daycare centers and playgrounds. And so that's what the safelawns.org movement is all about. And that's sort of the quick version of my own background.
And I think that's wonderful to make that connection. I'm sorry you had to have the experience you did. I know my sister's allergies started with latex allergies from working in a hospital, actually.
Mm-hmm.
But all the chemicals and stuff out there have a lot of latex items in them, for example, and they trigger very heavily those types of allergies. And I just see it developing more and more around people, and it is an awareness, because I think we've been programmed to, you've got to kill this weed off. Like you say, I have dandelions all over my yard, and I'm sitting here drying dandelion everything for teas and doing dandelion salads myself, and it is incredibly nutritious. And I think how we have to shift our mentality, how we've been told that this is it, and I think it is incredibly important, this work that you're doing of making this outreach, and I think a lot of us are blessed that you've had that platform to start from in order to reach out to people, because we need to think more about our kids. We need to think more about, like I said, our animals and things like that. And I've seen pictures on your website, and the lawns that you show on there with your organic care look just as beautiful, if not more beautiful, than the ones that people spray stuff all over. So
it's all, when you talk about beautiful and creating a beautiful lawn, and it's all an aesthetic definition that's basically a false definition that's been created by marketing. And, in fact, all lawn grass seed prior to the 1970s had clover in it, for example. It was supposed to be in there. And it was only a marketing campaign that made up the myth that clover is a weed. And dandelions, again, were part of most lawns. And most people did eat dandelions prior to the 1960s because they are so good for us. In fact, there are still seed companies in America that sell dandelion seeds because it is a wonderful component to salads, and so it's all a marketing campaign. This myth that we need these chemicals to make our lawns so-called beautiful, and it all comes back to a petroleum industry that's tied at the hip with a pesticide industry, that's tied at the hip with a latex industry, and it all comes back to the same place, and it's an industry that's trying to make a lot of money, and certainly there's nothing inherently wrong with trying to make a profit. But when you're doing it at the expense of the planet and people's health, that's just plain wrong. And so here we are tonight having this conversation, and I call it one conversation at a time, because the marketing dollars that they spend, it's in the billions of dollars that is spent in this country to convince us that we're somehow un-American if we allow a dandelion to grow on our grass. And we don't have $1 billion in our campaign. All we have is each other in these conversations that we're having, like the one we're having this evening.
Absolutely, and that is it. It's one conversation at a time. It's one awareness-building piece at a time. And ironically, I look at these people who are forcing this, and, of course, drawing into these petroleum resources and stuff is ecologically throwing us off on a much bigger scale from shifting the fluids around on the earth. They say that's part of what's behind global warming. But you can make just as much money healing the earth as you can destroying it. So, sticking to the money factor is just an invalid excuse in my book, but for a lot of people. One of the things, Paul, that you have done with your work, and I want to delve a little more into this, is to produce and star in a chemical reaction. And, I'd love for you to share even a little bit more about why that's so important, because part of using pesticides and chemicals is really, again, showing up for a lot of people. I know on your website for that, they talk about where it was happening in one little school area, and there was a doctor that made a connection to these chemical sensitivities in the lawn care products, and why you feel like this has become such an important area for people to pay attention to.
Well, you're absolutely right. As a journalist, I watched the story of Hudson, Quebec, and Hudson is a little village just to the west of Montreal in Canada. And this doctor named June Irwin, she's one of my heroes in life, she started to see rashes in the springtime, especially on children, that she couldn't explain. And the anesthetics and the creams that she would typically use were not curing these rashes. And she thought it was some kind of mysterious plant. She started doing blood work on patients and actually found that it was something called 2,4-D, which is the primary ingredient in most weed and feeds and most weed killers that people use to kill dandelions and clover and the like. And she wrote to the medical profession in Canada. They ignored her. She wrote to the federal government in Canada and said, these products that we're putting in weed and feed are dangerous. The government ignored her. So June went to every single town meeting in the little village of Hudson for 6 years and asked the town officers, why are we allowing people to put down poisons that are making our children sick? Why are we putting down poisons that are making the dogs and cats sick? Finally, after 6 years of going to town meetings, the town of Hudson, Quebec, became the first town in North America to ban the use of what they call cosmetic pesticides, things used to kill dandelions and clover for purely the sake of aesthetics. And the chemical industry, Monsanto and others, laughed out loud at the town of Hudson and said, you can't possibly ban our products. They're approved by the provincial government. They're approved by the federal government. And it wound up in court. And because the town actually fined the companies, and they paid their $100 fine but continued to laugh and continued to ignore Hudson's ban. So it went to local court, and then it went to district court. Well, much to everyone's great surprise, the district court judge ruled in favor of the town. So then the chemical industry got some lawyers, more high-powered lawyers, and appealed. It finally went all the way, years and years and years later, to the Canadian Supreme Court. And in 2001, the Canadian Supreme Court ruled unanimously in favor of Hudson, Quebec, saying you absolutely have the right to ban these substances. And there's never a good enough reason to put these things down if there's a chance that it's going to make a child sick. Well, that ban in Hudson, Quebec, then spread like wildfire across Canada to the point where today, 12 years later, today about 85% of Canada lives under the auspices of a pesticide ban. So most Canadian children today on their playgrounds don't have to deal with weed and feed products. They don't have to deal with Roundup. And I tracked that, I watched that, and I said, I bet there's a good story up there to be told to the American public. And so I got my HGTV camera crew back together, and we went up to Canada for a week, and we didn't know what we were going to find, but we found an amazing story. We did make a documentary film, and we were nominated for 3 Emmys a couple of years ago. Very proud of it, and it's shown all over the world. People can still buy individual copies of the movie through safelawns.org, and people can show it in their local communities. People can show it in their homes. People can show it in large auditoriums, and it continues to be a catalyst, if you will, for a movement that now this movement is catching hold in the United States. That's the good news, and certainly I'm not the only one beating the bandwagon, although I may be the loudest beater of the drum. I have lots of help now, and lots of people are picking up this cause.
And just recently, not that long ago, it was only, I want to say like 3 weeks ago, that there was parades going on all over to stop Monsanto.
Yes.
And to ban some of these things. So the support is out.
Most people think of Monsanto in terms of genetically modified organisms or GMOs that you referenced, and those are organisms that have been modified in some way with foreign cells. And that is fundamentally a different issue. That's terrible in its own right. Don't get me wrong. But in this situation, they're putting known toxins. Pesticides are products that are designed to kill organisms, and they're putting them out on lawns where kids are going to be rolling around and dogs and cats are going to be licking, and they're putting this stuff out there. It's a known poison. It says right on the package, keep out of the reach of children. Well, how on earth can we be keeping it out of the reach of children if we're allowing it on our playgrounds, if we're putting it on our own yards? And it's not like it magically goes away as soon as we put it down. In fact, it gets tracked into houses. It gets on children's skin and in their eyes and in their ears, and it causes all kinds of bad side effects. And the American Academy of Pediatrics came out last November and specifically said we need to keep these products, weed and feed and Roundup, we have to keep them away from children. The evidence is very clear that this stuff is bad. So why are Americans still using this stuff when Canadians have banned it?
Exactly, and it's so great to have their precedents there because it does give hope for the people that do want to do it. But I think part of it is just that awareness. Americans have a little more in general, and I'm not saying this is everybody because there are a ton of great Americans out there. In general, they have a little more of a greed factor. They have a little more of a, hey, my lawn's got to look as good or better than the next person's lawn. But yeah, my sister's a master gardener, and I was discussing some of this, and I was looking at her yard and how beautiful it is without any pesticides on it, how things are flourishing well there. And we looked across at one of the neighbors' yards, and there's brown spots all over, and they spray pesticides there.
Yeah.
And it really is. I think people think that they're taking an easy way out, and they're not. They're spending a lot of money that they don't need to be spending on these things. And I don't know your thoughts on it, but it seems to me that it's not that much harder to take care of a lawn organically than it is to pay people to come in and spray all this stuff, because you're still going to have some weeds to pull. You're still going to have things that have to be taken care of. But I think people really in general have not thought about that bigger step that, oh, yeah, my kids are rolling around in the grass or sitting in the grass or my pets are eating the grass, or that's going to actually be tracked into my house. That's not just going to go away the first time I water the lawn.
Right. Yeah, and people, again, through marketing, it's the same mechanism, have been conditioned to reach for a spray. And the same way they might reach for an aspirin if they don't feel well. And it is a different mentality. We're trying to get to a root cause here. And so when we talk about organic lawn care, like I wrote a book called The Organic Lawn Care Manual, we see weeds as messengers sent by Mother Nature to tell us something about the soil below. And in other words, if your lawn is mostly dandelions, it's because that's what your soil beneath your lawn wants to grow. Your soil wants to grow dandelions. And you can kill the messengers any number of ways. You could hit it with boiling water. You could hit it with salt, and salt would kill the dandelions. You could hit it with Roundup if you believe that Roundup isn't bad. You could hit it with weed and feed. You could pull it out, and you could eat it. But the dandelions are going to keep coming back. That's my point. They're going to keep coming back until we change the underlying soil conditions that make the dandelions want to grow. The same way our headache is going to keep coming back if we don't figure out what's causing the headache in the first place. If I drink 6 beers tonight and wake up in the morning with a headache and I take an aspirin, maybe the headache goes away. If I drink 6 beers the next night, I'm going to keep getting a headache over and over and over again. And it's no different with the lawn care and natural landscaping. And in fact, and I can show people thousands of examples where it is easier to maintain your landscape naturally, organically, than it is with chemicals. And it is less expensive, and it's certainly a whole lot safer.
Yeah, and I think that's it. And I think really we do have to look at that safety first and foremost, as you brought up, in the chemical reaction. I mean, even above and beyond everything else. And I love that you're bringing up that what is growing in the weeds that are coming through, so-called weeds, are messengers. And it's funny because here in America we look, for example, at those dandelions and we go, oh, look at all those weeds. Well, in the meantime, they're paying a fortune for those in Germany to have them on their table. Right. Or, these different things, or the tea. I mean, I looked up the tea recently because I thought, well, what kind of value do I have here in my yard? But it's like $30 a pound for a bag of dandelion tea. It's absolutely, crazy what we just throw away in our own yards. And like you say, the clover honey and things like this, I think that people forget that there is so much that can be done and so much that can be made with it. But I do love how you brought up that it's a messenger about the soil that's there.
Right.
And I know in some of your work you talk about ground covers, because I know I'm doing some ground, working on shifting over, for example, to yarrow, with some of the grass out. And that actually is clearing most of the weeds out of my yard, too. Right.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many lawn alternatives, and that's a section of the book. The Organic Lawn Care Manual is grass alternatives, and grass has become the default landscape mechanism, if you will, in the United States. But I'm seeing more and more communities, especially in the Southwest, where water is such a precious resource, where communities are giving tax benefits for people who remove lawns. And so there's lots of different ecological reasons not to plant just grass. And Safe Lawns is not an anti-lawn campaign. I want to be clear about that. I love lawns, and lawns are beautiful, and I have children I love to play a ball with, and it's no fun playing ball in a 3-foot field where you can't run around freely, and I lose my little 3-year-old daughter in that field if I didn't mow the grass. And so the lawns aren't the bad guys. It's how we maintain them that's the problem with, gasoline guzzling mowers that blow smog and increase smog levels, and of course all the chemical fertilizers that we're putting down to make the grass green. And with our natural approach, we're using all substances that are recycled substances. Every organic fertilizer uses materials that used to be alive, either derived from plants and animals. And that's just finding a good use for something, and or compost, taking stuff, food scraps, for example, or even grass clippings or sawdust or leaves, and using these materials for food for the lawn. And I have, in fact, there's a section in the book called Free Lunches for the Lawn, 12 different substances that you might find around the house that you can feed your lawn with.
That's awesome. And these are the things that ordinarily a lot of times too people are just putting in the garbage disposal or throwing away or things like this, and they could be using it on their lawn and feeding it and taking care of it. And I'm glad that you brought up that point, because I can enjoy a good lawn as well. My lawn is not a good lawn where I am. There's not much of actual real lawn. It's just a mixture of a bunch of stuff. And I went to some of the others for very easy, low maintenance care on my property. But I love a good lawn, like I said, to play in, and especially when you have children and things like that. And it really does come down to that care factor. You've done a couple of different things as well. You've got the award-winning video series, Making the Organic Lawn Care Transition, and you've also authored the Organic Lawn Care Manual. So talk to us about some of these things of how we can do some of this care. How can we make some of this transition over to having to organic landscaping or organic lawn care?
Right.
I mean, you started because of the lawnmower.
Right. Well, I think the number one takeaway point begins with the soil, and I like to say that your soil in your landscape needs to be every bit as alive as you and I are. And the organisms in the soil, whether they're the earthworms that we can see with the naked eye, or the microscopic organisms, bacteria and protozoa and nematodes, that we can only see with a microscope, all of those organisms that make up living soil have the exact same needs that people do. They need to drink. They need to eat. They need to breathe. They digest their food, and then they excrete their food, and that's how natural fertilization happens. And for me, having had the great luxury of growing up very poor on a dairy farm, we spent our life managing cow manure. People think you spend your life on a dairy farm milking cows. Actually, that's a very, very small part of the day. Most of the day you take the cow manure and you put it back out on the field so that you can grow more food for the cows. And my grandmother would beg my grandfather for some cow manure for her gardens so that she could grow better vegetables and even grow better flowers. And so I was able to see what I call the poop loop of life, where it was just a cycle. And you fed the cows, and they digested their food, they excreted their food, and that became fertilizer. And so that happens trillions of times a nanosecond in healthy soil. And another way to look at this for folks is look out at the forest. Find a forest in your yard or in your community and ask yourself, how did the trees grow so tall? And it's not because anybody ran around with Miracle-Gro at midnight fertilizing. It's because Mother Nature already knows how to do this. And if the pine needles fall to the ground and the leaves fall to the ground, and nobody rakes them up and puts them in a plastic bag by the side of the road, you leave all that stuff on the ground, it all biodegrades. It all gets consumed by soil organisms, and it becomes the pine needles and the leaves become the food that make incremental growth year over year possible, and that's how we get tall trees. And so the fundamental core of making the transition to organics is understanding that you don't buy a beautiful lawn at the garden center or at the Walmart or at Home Depot. You buy a beautiful landscape by paying attention to the soil and nurturing the soil and doing everything you can to bring that soil to life. And that might mean not over-compacting the soil, because if you drive over the soil too much, the organisms can't breathe anymore because the soil's too compacted. If you don't give the soil enough water, the organisms can't drink. So it's really as simple as that initially, and then you take off from there with a step-by-step approach. You know, the marketing for the chemical lawn industry is geared around 4-step plan, where they want to sell us product 4 times a year. And people ask me, how many steps is your organic lawn care approach? And I always facetiously say 12 steps. And the first step is mental detoxification. And that's what we're doing here with this conversation right now, is helping people understand that natural lawn care doesn't involve a bunch of chemicals. It's not something you can buy. It's a mindset that you need to start with.
Absolutely. I think there's no question about that. And you talk about growing up on a dairy farm and that shift and being able to see that cycle. I had an uncle who was a dairy farmer, so both my parents grew up on farms, and they understand that very well of just that transition of keeping everything going. But I have to say, I remember going back to the farm as a child, and the food was amazing that came off of that farm. You know, it was you couldn't go to a store anywhere and buy food that began to look like that. I've got a friend where I live now that will go to the local farmers markets this time of year here in our town, and he'll go and he'll bargain with the people and just say, I want all the really badly bruised stuff. I want the stuff that looks pretty because it's got the best flavor to it. And they can't sell it to other people, so they'll give him a discounted rate to clear them out. And he'll go home and make incredible salsa and then take them a batch of salsa, for example.
Right.
It is I think you bring that good point. It's one of the things with compassion that it's about that connection with the earth. It's about observing the cycles. And when we observe the cycles that happen in earth, we can learn just about everything that we need to know in life. Right.
Yeah, I tell people in understanding natural landscaping, you don't have to work harder, but you have to think differently. And initially for some people that means you do have to think harder. And you have to think about how the natural systems work. And you have to think about how those trees grow so tall in the forest. And once you've thought about that process, and you understand that you don't buy a beautiful landscape and something you can get in a bag, then you can make that transition. I do a lot of consulting, and my primary client now is in Potomac, Maryland, and it's one of the most magnificent properties anywhere in the world. And when I got there 3 years ago, they were applying chemicals to about 75 acres of paradise, and the young mother said she didn't want her yet-to-be-born daughter rolling around in a bunch of chemicals, and would I teach them how to teach their landscape staff how to do this? And here we are 3 years later, and it's so lush, and it's so green, it's just so gorgeous, and the crew that works there feels so much better about their job because they're not being exposed to these chemicals. And it all comes back for me to my grandmother on the farm. She had it right all along, and I'm sorry that for a few years in my life I ignored her great advice. Because farmers do know best. I think that's a Paul Harvey line, that great Paul Harvey line, and he always said farmers know best, and he's absolutely right.
Well, and when you think about it on a bigger scale like a farmer, I think, too, a lot of people, they might have a smaller yard to deal with or a small patch of something, so they're thinking, oh, well, you know, this pesticide or this bag of stuff is $5 or $10 or something like that. When you're a farmer and you're thinking, okay, I've got 100 acres of land, you're not looking at $5 or $10. with things. And, of course, people don't even spend that now because they pay somebody else to do it. Now, I'm glad you brought up this point of this property that you're working on, because that was one of the questions that I had, was how long does it take to make this transition? If you've had a lawn that you've been spraying a lot of chemicals on, how long does it take to transition so that it is a safe lawn, so that it is free of those pesticides?
Well, the sort of legal answer to that in the organic community would probably be 3 years. If you had a farm where you'd been spraying chemicals and you said, I want to become an organic farmer, then you wouldn't be able to be certified organically for 3 years. But anybody listening can get rid of their chemicals tomorrow and go cold turkey and begin the process and transition, understanding that a chemically based landscape system is sort of like a drug addict, and it's your lawn and your landscape is addicted to those products, and the only way that your landscape can feed it or gets fed is from that bag or from that spray can. And when you do that, you take away the soil's ability to fend for itself. And so there is a transition period where you have to wean the drug addict off the drug. In this case, you have to wean the chemically induced soil off the chemicals. And the lawn may look worse before it looks better. That's the truth. But if you take some of the steps outlined in our videos, outlined on our website, outlined in our book, the Organic Lawn Care Manual, you can certainly, by the end of if you were to start right now in June, by this fall, you would have an organic lawn that you were satisfied with in virtually all cases. Not in every case, because sometimes the soil is just so bad it can take longer. But the key is to give the soil food that it can use to fend for itself. So that when I say fend for itself, that means it can produce, whether you want to have great grass, you want to have great vegetables in your vegetable garden, you want to have great trees and shrubs or roses, it's all the same thing. You need to get that soil healthy. And right away in the transition, to be successful, you're going to need to understand compost. And compost is biodegraded material that used to be alive, and you can buy it in a bag at a store. You can make it yourself in your own backyard. You could make it yourself in your kitchen by having worms eat your food scraps. But I like to say that compost is mankind's single greatest contribution back to the earth. No one has ever shown me a better one than that. Maybe love, but love is a little bit esoteric. As far as something practical that you can do for Mother Earth, the conscious creation of compost, and that simply take the idea that if it used to be alive, it can be composted to use to give us life again through the growth of plant material. So grass clippings, leaves, any of your food scraps, you can all be composted. They will biodegrade. You take that material, you get this rich brown material that smells nice and earthy and sweet, and put it out there on your gardens, put it out there on your lawn, and that's how you begin to bring your landscape back to life. And we also use a biologically active liquid called compost tea. That's basically you take dry compost and you steep it in water just like you would a tea bag. You steep it in water for a period of time, and you put that liquid out on your landscape, and that liquid trickles down to the plant roots and brings those plant roots back to life. And then you can put down organic fertilizers, and these can be things like feather meal and blood meal and soybean meal and corn meal and fish meal and alfalfa and all things that, again, used to be alive, instead of something from a chemical, from a laboratory. So the time it takes is really reflective of your own effort. Certainly, if you want to transition cold turkey and you want to do it overnight and you have access to compost, you can do it pretty quickly. If you don't have much budget, you don't have much time, and you don't want to put in much effort, it can take longer. And so certainly I can help you with that at safelawns.org with that transition. That's what we do. That's what our videos show you how to do. And I talk about that property in Maryland, where I reference. It's called Glenstone. It's a museum that anybody can come visit, and we can show you what we do there. You can go to glenstone.org and see the museum that I'm talking about. It's actually a modern art museum. And you go to safelawns.org, and there's some information on there about Glenstone. And some of this might sound really overwhelming for people who are hearing it for the first time, because it's not as easy as going to the garden center and buying a bag. But really, at the end, it's so much easier, and you're going to be so much happier, so much safer for your lifestyle, and in fact, you're going to save a lot of money. The chemical industry doesn't like hearing that. It's, in fact, what they are most afraid of.
Money.
They're most afraid of losing money.
If they weren't making money off chemicals, they wouldn't be doing chemicals.
Exactly. Right.
That's a definite given there. And I do have to admit, when I was looking at things for the show and I was going over your website and things like that, you have incredible videos on there, and they're very useful, and they're very well laid out, and they're very clear and easy to understand about what to do. So I highly encourage people to go to your website at safelawns.org and look at those videos, because tons and tons of useful information involved with that, and it's really appreciated. Your website's so user friendly and informative, which I tremendously appreciate in there. And 3 years, I find, is not that much time. You make me feel better about not raking up my pine needles now and my leaves.
Yeah.
All my neighbors do that, and I just leave them on the lawn and let them mulch in, and I have things.
If they're really, really thick and you don't rake them up, you're going to have dead patches. Where there's not going to be any grass growing. You can also run your lawnmower over those and mulch them up and turn those into food a little bit more quickly. And in my case, I use an electric lawnmower because I don't like having gas on my property. So there's a whole bunch of tips and tricks that we show people on the website and in the book and such.
Mhm. Yeah, it's great. I think I'm fortunate. I must have very good soil here, because I lost a peach tree last year in a big windstorm, and it just snapped and broke, and we had to take the tree out. But there was this one little sprout coming up near the base of the tree. That was last year, and I think we cut that down last fall. Around October or something like that, September or October. That little sprout is now about 5 feet high.
Right.
So, yeah, it's amazing what that good soil is. And what I find, too, if I keep my lawn or my yard properly watered, in a healthy way, and I find that if I use some of these kind of natural mulching things, like the pine needles and stuff, I have very few problems with weeds. What do come up is very easy to get rid of in my yard.
Right. Yeah.
Very easy. They come out very easily, and it's a matter of finding that balance. So I might water, for example, early in the morning, and then give it a little time, a couple hours or so, and then I might go out and pull some stuff, and it takes me a fraction of the time as if I'm out there yanking on them trying to get it up, because I have a very clay-based soil here where I am.
Right.
And that's probably
you bring up a good point about, certainly if you're talking about gardens, then, mulch, and we use compost for our mulching material in every case too. We don't use, if we have pine needles and leaves available, we certainly would use that material, or you can compost it first and then use it as mulch. You can do it either way. And but that's certainly really important. And I'm glad you brought up watering, because most people water improperly by watering too frequently and not enough. And in the case of a lawn especially, but it's true with anything, water really, really deeply. And your goal ought to be to water once a week. Now, in certain really hot climates in the south, that won't be enough no matter what. But in general, in most parts of the country, you want to water really deeply once a week so that the plant roots learn to grow down to get a drink as opposed to up near the surface to get a drink. And that's where plants run into problems, and they don't become very drought tolerant. And so we're here in June tonight. Pretty soon it's going to get pretty hot most places. And if those roots aren't deep enough, that plant's going to struggle in July and August. So get that water nice and deep so that those roots learn to grow down deeply before the heat of the summer.
Mm-hmm. And you actually have certain times that you suggest, and I think if I remember on your video, the goal is to get about 1 inch of water.
1 inch of water per week is on average what a grass plant needs to thrive. And it's what I'm just saying now is that getting that inch of water down all at once is the best outcome for the grass, because it'll charge up that soil full of water, and it'll dry out near the surface, but that's okay. That's actually going to be a healthier lawn if you let that happen, because those roots will go down, down, down to get that drink. And people say, well, how do I know I've got an inch? Well, you can put a tuna can out there, and if you got a lawn sprinkler going, you can put a tuna can out there as a rain gauge. And when that tuna can is full to 1 inch, stop watering for the week and don't water again. And you can also dig down with a shovel or a trowel and dig down into the ground and feel the soil and get your hands a little dirty. It's fun. And is the soil moist 6, 8 inch, 10 inches down? And if the answer is no, then you need to water some more. If it's wet 2 inches down but not wet 6 inches down, you don't have the right situation. You really want to have moist soil pretty deep and have it drier near the surface. And you don't want to water at night in the summer. Please don't water at night in the evening in the summer, because the dew comes in the evening in the summer, very heavy dew, and if you exacerbate that moisture near the surface by watering in the evening, you're going to get all kinds of fungal diseases in your grass. So when you're going to water in the morning, early in the morning. Sunrise is a great time to do it. Try to have your watering done by 8 or 9 in the morning. Let the surface of the lawn dry off all day long. Don't water at noontime. It's the worst time to water. A lot of the water evaporates before it ever gets in the ground. And then don't water in the evening. So get that inch of water down in the morning.
And that's a good point too. I mean, I know here where I live, we actually have restrictions. We can't water during the day here.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You know, if they wanted to, they could fine you for that.
Right.
And it's just part of the way the water usage situation is. Now we're, for example, high desert terrain, like I said, a lot of clay soil, and here if you were to just put a whole bunch of water down on the ground, it would just kind of run off.
Right.
It wouldn't. You almost have to moisten it a little bit and then go over it again to get it to really soak in on things. And we're very, very dry. We don't even get dew here. But most areas of the country, like you say, do have that dew factor, and it is an important consideration because people could think, oh, I'm watering in the cool of the night, and really they're killing their lawn off when they're doing that.
Yeah, and even where you are, if you can get some compost working into that soil over time, because I've got some friends out your way, and if you can get compost worked into that soil, it increases what I call the sponge factor of the soil. So if you think of a sponge, the thicker the sponge, the more water it can hold, and that's what the addition of compost does for your soil. It increases the sponge factor. Or think of it as a cake, and a cake or bread that's rising. The thicker the cake, the thicker the bread, the thicker the sponge. That's what you're doing, and that factor is true no matter where you live in the country.
Perfect. Now, I've got somebody in the chat room that wanted to find out if you sold personal kits, or maybe you've got some that you recommend, because I know you've got a page on your site where you recommend products to test a yard to see what nutrients are needed in the yard. For example, if the soil is too acidic or basic or needs more nitrogen.
Yeah, I don't. When it comes to soil testing, and that's an excellent question. One of the most important things that you can do, whether you're organic or even if you are still with chemicals, is to test the soil, because if you're not testing, you're just guessing. So most states have a cooperative extension service that will do soil tests, and not all of them anymore, but most of them do. And soil testing isn't something that you should do yourself, frankly. The test kits that they sell at the department stores or at the garden centers, they're very difficult to read, and you're going to be much better off spending the $10, $12, or maybe $15 at the most, and going out and digging up the soil, and you want to go down into the root zone. And say you've got a 3rd-acre lawn, an average lawn. You want to collect soil 4 to 6 inches deep from half a dozen locations and commingle all that soil and send that in. And you'll get some results back that you can then take action upon. And having said that, if you have an area of your lawn that looks different than every other area of your lawn, maybe you just can't get it right, maybe the weeds just won't go away, or just something about it looks really different, get that soil tested separately from the rest, because there's probably something different there about the soil than there is about the soil where the lawn may look a little better. So I certainly wouldn't recommend a soil test kit. Sometimes we recommend various products, but when it comes to soil testing, the state cooperative extension agencies virtually in every case have a very affordable soil test that you can get done.
Perfect. And I think that's great. I think it definitely helps people out, because, again, like you say, it's about educating people, and if people don't know this is where I should be going to have it tested, as opposed to just buying the kits, they're sold, here, just buy this kit and test your soil. So, and the person in our chat room says thank you for that.
Oh,
so
well,
definitely with that. Now, you've got also another dimension to all the work that you do, that you've started up, which is you've created Organic Green Pros, and that's taking it, organic green landscaping to another level. Tell us a little bit more about what you're doing with that. And
well, the gentleman named Mark Long, actually, I tease him that he used to be on the dark side. He actually grew up his dad worked for Scott's Miracle-Gro as a lead scientist, and Mark actually helped Scott's Miracle-Gro launch into the into the chemical lawn care service industry. So in certain communities across the United States, you'll see Scott's lawn service trucks driving around, just like you see the True Green Chemilon trucks driving around. And Mark was the guy who helped launch that. And Mark and I met at the intersection of organic lawn care when he was representing a new product that's an organic product, it's a safe product that you can put down to kill weeds if you feel you must. And we started talking and bonding over the fact that the industry, the lawn care industry, really was at a crossroads, and he felt it really needed to change. And he felt badly about the way he used to promote chemical usage. And so Mark and I launched Organic Green Pros together a couple of years ago to lend our expertise to municipalities, to businesses that wanted to make a change. and have been offering those services. And so I was in Durango, Colorado, for example, last year when Durango launched an initiative to get pesticides off its playgrounds, and I went down there and helped them out. And I spent a great deal of time doing that. For me personally, I spend an awful lot of time at the property that I've already mentioned here tonight, which is the Glenstone Museum. And it's the reason that I've begun to focus there on with my consulting is that people can come there and learn, and it's open to the public and it's free. Nobody needs to come there and be charged anything. And we will, anybody asks about how we do our landscape there, we'll let them know for free. And fortunately, it's an organization that has the financial resources to share this information for free, to share its art collection for free. And so I've begun to focus there in a way that I feel is sustainable for me as a human being. It's just such an exciting place. But certainly if anybody needs, any municipalities or any businesses need advice, Mark and I can help them out, and I can put them in touch with, I've got a whole international network of experts in organic lawn care and sustainable landscaping. If I find that it's not practical for me personally to help, I can usually point people in the right direction. And more and more, we're seeing an industry that is welcoming change, and a larger percentage of Americans are requesting natural landscaping, organic lawn care than ever before. When people say organic lawn care doesn't work or organic lawn care is more expensive, what I hear when I hear those words is I don't know what I'm doing. And so it's all about education. It's all about getting the word out. I don't know how to drive a rocket ship to the moon, but there are people out there who do know how to do that. And for some people, organic lawn care sounds like rocket science right now. And it's really not. It's really common sense, Mother Nature approach.
I think that this initiative is really critical, again, because it comes back to part of where we were starting tonight with your chemical reaction work, too, because people are not thinking about, what they're passing by as they're coming and going into work. They're not thinking about, the gardeners came, they took care of stuff, but they're using all these power blowers, which I've never quite figured out what those power blowers do, because it just seems to displace dirt from one place to another. It doesn't seem like it actually does anything. They come in and they spray all this stuff for their landscaping around office spaces, and then it would be interesting to track some of that, and I'm sure the studies are out there of the days that they spray, and then employees are getting more headaches or having to leave early because they're not feeling well, or the amount of people that call in on a sick day shortly thereafter that. It concerns me that this is an initiative that really particularly needs an emphasis, for example, around hospitals. Because as you say, people are tracking these things down. A lot of this stuff is airborne. Just because your neighbor is using it on their yard or something like that, or one of these businesses are using it, you can still track it home. You can still pick the stuff up.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. People are very conditioned to understand secondhand smoke now. And you understand that if one person in a room is smoking a cigarette, everybody in the room is smoking that cigarette. It's no different on a Saturday morning, tomorrow morning, somewhere in the United States, in fact, millions of neighborhoods around the country in the United States, people are putting out their lawn chemicals. That means everybody in the neighborhood is putting out lawn chemicals, whether they like it or not. There are very few dead, calm days where stuff doesn't blow around, at least in most of the communities I've visited. And so if the breeze is blowing in your direction across the street from your neighbor's house, you are breathing in your neighbor's toxins. They're wafting in through your windows. Your children are breathing it in. Maybe your cats and dogs are running across the neighbor's lawn on the way home to your house, and so they're tracking it in. And so it really is a public health issue, and in a lot of the communities where they have banned these substances on public property, they have seen it as a community health issue. Now, no community in the United States has yet banned lawn chemicals on private property, but there are numerous ones that have done it on public property. In fact, the state of Connecticut and the state of New York have banned lawn chemicals around schools and daycare centers statewide. That's only 2 states out of 50. That's a problem. I mean, every state should be doing that and protecting the children at a minimum. In New Jersey, which has taken the lead on this issue, 36 communities have banned lawn and garden pesticides on public property. Algonquin, Maine, which is my home state, Algonquin, Maine just last week held an election, and they were going to ban lawn chemicals on private property, and it was about almost 50-50, but they voted to keep the lawn chemicals intact by a very narrow margin. So, but at least Algonquin is talking about this. And that's what the chemical reaction movie was designed to do. Is Paul Tukey can't be everywhere, so people can order the film and they can bring it into their community, and they can start a dialogue with their neighbors. Because people, that's a very difficult thing. How do I talk to my neighbor about this issue? I don't want to alienate my neighbor. I've got to see them every day. And so at Safe Lawns, I've written a few blogs about how to talk to your neighbors, and certainly the movie is one way, and leading by example with a lush organic lawn is another way. I live in Rhode Island now, and we've lived here a couple of years, and the lawn was just hideously bad when we moved in, and now we have the most lush green lawn in the neighborhood because I know what I'm doing. That I definitely have an advantage that way, but it's pretty simple. I'm feeding the soil good stuff so that the organisms in the soil can eat and digest and excrete their food, like I said in the last hour, and good things will happen. So it's really pretty simple.
And I think there's just, again, so many of those pieces that we don't think about, and I think I would love to see this banned, like in every state on public stuff. Because, like I said, we think about hospitals. They come and they spray something in the plants around, and you've got all these people with breathing issues and major health issues, and it's just going right in. It's just filtering right in there.
No, senior care facilities, hospitals, schools, all of those things where you have a population base that's at risk anyway. Certainly it shouldn't be anywhere, but at a minimum, those kinds of facilities ought not to have this stuff there. And again, when you look at the material safety data sheets and the labels for these kinds of products that we're putting out, they'll tell you the kinds of things that these things will do. And they cause neurological damage, and they're endocrine disruptors, and people get headaches and nausea and blurred vision and diarrhea. And so you got this at a hospital where people are in the hospital for those very things. And so you're absolutely right. It just shouldn't be there. And some people don't like bans. They don't like the politics involved in a ban, and they're more in favor of an educational campaign. And I don't like politics, and I don't like going to town meetings. Frankly, I've gone to lots and lots of them. But unfortunately, people aren't going to change because it's the right thing to do. In most cases, they're only going to change if the law says they must change. And so getting involved politically in enacting these bans is something that I still feel is important to do, even though most of my personal time going forward is probably going to be more in the consulting on educational things and working with Glenstone to get the word out, leading by example that way.
And I think there's another piece, too, that people forget about, is when you get these gardeners coming through and doing things for you, it's fine to pay somebody, but you really got to know that person because, if they're using their tools on a lawn that's using all kinds of pesticides and then they come and use their tools in your yard,
right?
Guess what's going to spread? It's going to be there.
Oh, yeah. No, It's you're absolutely right. I mean, actually, a lot of lawn diseases and weeds get spread that way in the undercarriages of lawnmowers and on the wheels of lawnmowers, and it just somebody else has got a Pythium blight on their lawn, and you don't. Your lawn's fine, but the guy's lawnmower shows up, and suddenly you've got a problem that came from your neighbor's lawn, and because these lawn guys are in a hurry and they don't clean their mowers yard to yard. And so you're right. You need to know who you're hiring, and you need to talk to them about the products that they're using, and you have every right to demand to see the material safety data sheets of the products they're using, and ask to see their certificate of insurance, and ask them if they understand soil biology. And if they look at you like you have three heads, then you're hiring the wrong person.
It's really a good point, and these different things that people do. And also in the chat room, I've got Rob Elder in there, and he made a comment. He said, "I've grown my business in the last 6 years based off of Paul's book. It's a must-have for anyone that is wanting to learn about organic care." And he wanted to make sure that I told him that that he says hi. Rob in Omaha says thanks.
Rob in Omaha is one of my favorite people on this planet. I got to spend a couple of days with Rob and his beautiful wife, and we went to the Omaha Earth Day and froze my butt off. He'll laugh hearing me say that, but he'll recall it was absolutely true. I thought that it was going to be in the high 50s and that would be okay. I got out there and it was in the high 30s. But Rob is a young guy who comes from the dark side. He's been doing lawn care since he was in his early teens and put a lot of chemicals down on people's lawns. And he now has a thriving business treating lawns naturally, organically, and he's leading by example. And he's going to be one of the superstars of the lawn care industry in the country here in the next 5 or 10 years, because he's really going about it the right way with the right energy and the right passion. And I had a great time with Rob. So you tell him I said hello as well.
I think he can hear you out there, definitely. And this is such a great thing to be hearing and seeing and noticing, because I know from doing, for example, astrology work and watching planetary influences and things like this, which I know isn't your field, but it does tie in, I promise.
I believe it or not, I actually understand a whole bunch about that, so I don't think you're crazy.
Definitely shows that one of the big global trends is all about green energy, sustainable living, and this is one of the top trends in the next 30 years, or now maybe the next 25 years still to go on these influences. And so I think we're going to be seeing huge shifts where people are going to, because there are going to be more and more organic landscaping people out there, yourself and Rob and these other people that are going to be surfacing and making these changes over for numerous reasons. And they're not going to be any more expensive to hire one of them as it is to hire somebody else using all this other junk. And I feel like we are going to see that shift where it's going to be pretty much like make the shift or lose your business.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And listeners, I mean, how do you affect change? There needs to be a legal reason to affect change or an economic reason to affect change. Those are pretty much the only two reasons it happens. And you vote with your wallet. And if you stop buying the bad stuff, people are going to want to make the good stuff. And we're seeing it in grocery stores where 20 years ago you had to go to Whole Foods and those kinds of stores, and now most of the supermarkets that I go to around the country have an organic aisle or several organic aisles. And so absolutely it's all up to the consumers to throw the bums out, as we say, and demand the good stuff and be a skeptical shopper when someone says something is safe. And you'll hear, and as someone who's been an activist for a very long time, and I've gone to so many communities and I've listened to the exact same arguments over and over and over, And the chemical lawn care industry guys will come in and say, well, our products are safe because they're approved by the EPA, because they're approved by the Environmental Protection Agency. And
you have to wear mouth suits to put them on, but they're safe, really.
Yeah, right. Well, in the EPA, in fact, if a product has to be approved by the EPA and it has an EPA label on it, that means it's inherently dangerous, because there's a whole classification of products that don't need EPA approval because they are fundamentally safe. And those are the kinds of products that Rob and others are using in lawn care now, products that don't require an EPA label, because you can put them on your kid's skin and they're not going to hurt your kid, and they're not going to hurt your cat and your dog. And so certainly I think that younger moms, younger dads are driving this. They are the movers and shakers of this movement, and they are more savvy shoppers than maybe our parents were. I mean, my mother, and God bless her, she's a wonderful mother, but I tease her about this now. You know, when I was a boy and it was springtime, we get that first 70-degree day in Maine, and sometimes you didn't get that till June, by the way. You know, she'd say, take off your shirt and burn off that winter skin. You know, she thought a sunburn in the springtime, early summer was a good thing. You know, because we now know the difference, and we now know that smoking is bad. And you know what? We now know that Roundup and weed and feed are terrible, and we got to stop using that stuff.
And I would say to the listeners out there and the people that listen to the show is that, you know, if you have any questions, again, Paul has a section on his website, safelawns.org, with recommended products, with recommended things. Go in, watch his videos. You know, he's there to help you. He's there to get you this information. Check his website, because you're probably going to find your answer there to know, and that's just a great starting point. And, Paul, I did want to touch on, too, because you have also co-authored Tag, Toss, and Run, 40 Classic Lawn Games. And talk to us, why are lawn games valuable to us?
I am in a unique situation in that I have a 28-year-old daughter, and I have a 3-year-old daughter and a 6-year-old daughter. So I kind of started over and made my own grandchildren. And it was very obvious to me the differences in their childhoods. When my daughter Amy, who's 6, was born, it was so different than Christina's childhood, and she's the 28-year-old. And really, my younger daughters, if we allowed them to do what they think they want to do, they would play on the iPad or the iPhone a substantial part of the day, whereas those things didn't exist in my daughter's life. And I began to hear the same frustration from a lot of parents. And so I didn't want to relegate an old-fashioned outdoor childhood to memory. You know, when I was a child back in Maine, my mother would send us out with a brown paper bag with maybe a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and a sliced up cucumber and a canteen full of water, not a bottle of water, but a canteen full of water, and be home by dinner time. And we would go out and we would play all day long, and we would play every game that you can imagine. And so taking my lawn movement, the Safe Lawns movement, one step further and helping parents understand that kids ought to be outside playing, number one, they ought to be outside playing on a safe lawn. Well, what do they do when they get out there? Some of the younger parents today didn't have the blessings that I had, having to fend for myself as a young boy or playing with friends in the neighborhood. So I began to recall those games and then to research them, and went around the world virtually through the gift of the internet and found out about games that are played in different cultures around the world, because there are 40 games in the book. I think probably 15 of them I had never heard of before I began my research. And there's some games in there that can be played on sidewalks and indoors as well. But, badminton, bocce, croquet, those are sort of the big three that everybody thinks about. But there's games like Cube that's played in Scandinavia, and there's just so many games that I had a blast with, and there's Native American games. And so we compiled all those into the book, Tag, Toss, and Run. You can get that on our website at safelawns.org. And last year I spent a great deal of time going around the country doing lawn games festivals and the Lawn Games for Life campaign. And we did birthday parties, and we did public festivals. We did 11,000 school children outside of Pennsylvania at one point last year, and it was just wonderful to see wheelbarrow races and sack races. And I'm actually going to my daughter's school in Rhode Island on Monday and doing an outdoor end-of-year festival, playing all the games in the book with the children, and they just love it. They absolutely love it, and they get excited to tell their parents about it. And there's no greater time to talk about the message of Safe Lawns than when a child is rolling around the grass with the grass right in the child's hands and face, and you say, you know what, Mom and Dad, you really shouldn't be putting poisons on that grass where your kids are having so much fun.
Yeah. It is a great tie-in, and I agree, because I lived near a park growing up, and so we had all of that play space, and I remember a lot of those games as well, and such a valuable part. And I think we get so used to, it's kind of that generation of parents that just says, well, here's something to keep the kids occupied so I don't have to deal with them, worry about them, whatever. But we really need that interaction, and I was so happy to see this as part of the work you were doing, because that interaction, that play, that laughter that comes out of it, the physical movement, all important parts of what we need to keep in our society. And
yeah, I mean, it's so sad. I mean, 1 in 3 children is clinically obese now in this country. 1 in 3. I found a photo from the 1950s around a municipal swimming pool with about 100 children in this particular photo. You couldn't find an overweight child in that photo anywhere in the whole thing. Certainly some were larger than others, but no child that was clinically overweight. And now it's 1 in 3, and it's a national epidemic. It's the largest health concern that we have, and it's not because children are fundamentally lazier than we were. It's that they are spending so much sedentary time, eating so much bad food, stuff that can barely be called food. It's all genetically modified, and that's another subject for another day. But
right.
By getting kids outside and getting them active and getting them away from the video games for at least a little while, and we're not going to get rid of video games. I mean, that cow's long left the barn. But as parents, it's so important to get them outside, engaged with nature. And if a child doesn't grow up with those values and appreciate the value of green space and grass and bumblebees, then we're going to lose those things. And where are we going to be? So I was, again, so fortunate to have the experience of growing up in a dairy farm. The dairy farms are all going away. The farms are going away. Right now we've still got enough lawns where if we treat them the right way and we get the kids out there playing on them like they're supposed to be, then maybe we still have a chance.
And I think part of what people forget is if we get rid of these spaces, if we let them go away, then we're getting rid of ourselves as well.
That's absolutely true.
I mean, just look at these areas like in Arizona and things like that. People couldn't survive on the lands because they couldn't grow things.
Right.
It's a huge factor that we have to look at. If we're not taking care of spaces where we're growing things and we're taking care of these lawns and we're taking care of these areas to play and we're making those a priority, we're going to be gone too. And that's another piece that just hasn't, I don't think, quite hit home all the way with people. They're not making that full connection. But hopefully through the work you're doing and some of the work I'm doing, that I'm helping people make those bigger connections in there. It's ironic, during the week prior to the show, I had a discussion with somebody who's a teacher, and they were mentioning that one of their students actually asked if it was safe to play in the grass. And when I heard this, at first I thought, well, I realized later that somewhere this child actually had been taught it might not be safe to play in the grass. But my first reaction was, this is so sad that a child would actually have to ask that.
Yeah, it is. It is.
So
I walk around this neighborhood in Rhode Island with my daughter Amy, who's 6, and she has begun to pick up on. She doesn't understand. I know how to get rid of the dandelions, but I actually don't even try because she loves them so much, and she loves all the other flowers that come up throughout the season on our lawn, and she looks at the neighbors' lawns and doesn't understand why they don't have any flowers and why they wouldn't want them and why they would. And she understands now that they're putting bad stuff down to kill those dandelions and other flowers. And so we'll go for walks in the evening, and she knows what she calls the safe lawns from the bad lawns. And I wish all children knew that. And you're right. I wish they didn't have to even think about that. That's too bad. But that I talk a lot to schools, and I believe that this message, that's where it needs to go. I actually do this talk for students. I do a lot of school assemblies, and the topic is, did you know you can eat your lawn if your parents don't kill it first? And we spend time in the classroom eating dandelions and eating clover blossoms and chickweed. Chickweed's so delicious. Kids just love to eat it, and they'll go home and they'll talk to their parents. And certainly there are times when the parents, we hear from the parents who aren't very happy about being challenged by their 6-year-old about the stuff they're using on the lawn. And I love the question. And I ask the kids, have you ever seen the little yellow lawn signs that say "keep off the grass"? And most of the time, 3/4 of the hands in the room will go up because they've seen those lawn signs. And I say, well, then do you keep off the grass? And some of them say yes, some of them say no. And one little girl, she's in the movie A Chemical Reaction. She says, well, I do, but my dog doesn't because he can't read. It's funny, but it's sad. And good, well-meaning people trying to keep up with the Joneses for aesthetic beauty who are willing to put their dogs and cats and their kids at risk in the process. And it's too bad. And they're being fed a marketing message that this stuff is safe when used as directed. When that's the biggest lie in America today.
And all we have to do is shift it to being where organic and this type of care is the fashionable thing, and that is the way to be better than the neighbors, is to go organic and not use this stuff. And that becomes the bragging rights.
Right.
It's an amazing thing. You're doing amazing work, and certainly you're out there and you're making some progress because there are states that are taking hold. It might only be 2 states right now, but who knows? In 5 years from now, it could be 10, or it could be 15, or it could be 20 states or more. And I think the more conscious parents are becoming, and they are, because they are having to take their kids to the doctors more. They are dealing with more of these chemical sensitivities. It is something that the doctors are actually looking at these days. And, and that's what's going to change it. People getting out there and raising their voice and saying this isn't acceptable anymore. And it's not. And it's part of our ascension, our emergence as a race. And it's part of what's included. Paul, I want to tremendously thank you for your time, the wealth of information you've shared here tonight. We've been talking with Paul Tukey, by the way, tonight. He's been sharing with us his work in organic lawn care and landscaping, and we've mentioned his website several times throughout the show, and please go check it out, safelawns.org. It is at the bottom of the show description. If you've missed any part of this show, share the link as well. Come back, listen to it in the archives. It's available immediately after the show's over, and there's no time limit on that, so people can come in and listen as long as they want and get this information and learn and pick everything up. And Rob is sharing a picture of his organic lawn in the in the chat room there. But Paul, is there anything else that you'd like to share with us tonight? Because I really appreciate after a long day you've taken your time late at night to be with us.
No, I mean, I appreciate the work that you're doing and the great spirit and the work that people like Rob Elder are doing out in Omaha. And Omaha would not be the first place I would think of to have a first-rate organic lawn care company, but there is, and all the other folks out there, don't despair. If you don't have an organic lawn care company in your community, vote with your wallet, start talking to your lawn care person, or see it as an economic opportunity of yourself to potentially take it on, because again, it's not complicated, and there is an opportunity at hand here for people who are willing to make a difference. And again, like you said, safelawns.org. There's a lot of material, a lot of information there. Come see us at glenstone.org if you're ever in the Washington, D.C. area, and we'll arrange for a tour of our great landscape out there. And again, thank you for having me. And yes, I am going to go get some sleep now. So I appreciate, and any time in the future, if you want to chat again, let me know.
Thank you so much, Paul. It's really appreciated. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
And yes, go get sleep. Well, again, we've been talking with Paul Tukey. If you've missed any part of the show, listen to it in the archives. It is going to be available for you. Next week, I will have Adam Hall on my show. We will be looking at his work with his recent book release, Earthkeeper Alliance, which talks about inner and outer ecology. It's a real-life story of evolution and dissolution from quest, conservation, and nature as free therapy. We're going to be looking at Adam's concept of undevelopment in order to preserve land and to continue to provide spaces for people to connect with nature and renew their inner self. And I chose to bring on both Paul Tukey and Adam Hall at this time of year because it is so important with the summer season here. This is the time to get out and enjoy nature. It's the time to get out there and enjoy your yards and your lawns and these open spaces, and to take advantage of what it has to teach us, to take advantage of seeing the cycles and everything that's involved with that. My next set of books, again, is going to be coming out very soon. I really, truly am finally right at the edge of finishing it. So I'm definitely hoping to have that announcement out for you coming up very soon. And that's going to be a look at how to find and develop relationships with somebody that will last a lifetime with you. It's a look at how we all take on masculine, feminine energy roles no matter what sex we're born into. I currently have about 20 events up on the site that I run my events through, which is jesseandnicholsgeorge.eventbrite.com, and that's happening starting actually within the next 2 weeks and going all the way through the end of August. So take your choice. There's all kinds of things there, from relationships, personal emergence, just weekends delving into meditation and energy work, getting out in nature, finances and successes, and building your reputation in businesses. So there's a lot of different topics. Go in and check that out. A lot of great things happening with that. And that's also where any of the events will be listed for the Compassion Tour as that starts to develop up, which I do want to mention. I have started a campaign on Indiegogo to fund the Compassion Tour, because part of what I'm doing with that work is starting to move into, on the fundraisers, being able to offer more opportunities and more things with the fundraisers. And I'd like to get to a point where I can offer workshops for free at the fundraisers. So supporting that Indiegogo campaign, sharing it, there's other options there that I could talk more with you about in regards to that. If you get in there and you help sign on to Indiegogo, just put in Compassion Tour, and my information will come up right away on that. And you can donate anything you want. There are some gifts that I have for people that are donating on there, which is well worth checking that out. Also, you can find out more about the work that I'm doing with Compassion, connect with me, check out my blog, purchase products or services that I offer, find ways to connect with me, listen to archive shows, see upcoming shows, watch video tips, tons of stuff right through my website at JessieAnnNicholsGeorge1, that's the number 1.com. And there's also a great section there for Main Street Universe, where you can follow all of our hosts there, catch the upcoming shows as well as the archive shows, learn a little bit about the people that are a part of Main Street Universe, and that information is all listed at the bottom of today's show's description. My books are also available on Amazon.com for paperback, as well as BarnesandNoble.com and Smashwords for the ebook version, and that includes Kindle and PDF through Smashwords. They've got every form there, so that's a great opportunity. And the special that I've got for June, I've actually got some mini sessions running for June, which is right on my homepage on my website. We're looking at $15 for a 10-minute session, coaching session, $30 for a 20-minute session. Book your appointment now for that. People have been taking advantage of it. They're getting a lot of results in there, and I'm one of those people where you don't need to always work with me for a month or 3 months or 6 months. Oftentimes, we can make those breakthroughs in a 40-minute session or a 20-minute session, so it's a great time to take advantage of that. And you can keep up on the monthly specials there as well as other things. In addition to the Indiegogo campaign, I do want to extend a thank you to the Matriarch Gathering, which has brought me on as a speaker for their 2013 gathering. It's going to be in Durango, Colorado. That's happening October 5th and 6th. I will be speaking on the 6th at their presentation. Very affordable conference to go to. So I'll be bringing you more information on that. They're also going to be opening a despacho prayer ceremony Friday night on the 4th prior to starting into the conference, and that is open to everybody to attend. So it's going to be an amazing weekend there with them. And I've also created Jessie's Quantum Club. You can discover more about that at jessiesquantumclub.eventbrite.com. That'll give you all the details there. Don't forget that we've got several shows here on Main Street Universe throughout the week. Sunday nights, Darren Bouquet, who's a reader at Madame Laveau in New Orleans, doing spiritual insights. Kevin Baird walking on the sidewalk with his Horizon Oracle Journeys deck, a deck that he created, which you can find out more about at templeofgaia.com. Tuesdays is Inner Wisdom with Mary Phelan. Wednesday nights we have Daniel and Janice on our flagship show, as well as Brett has joined back into that show again, and that is our flagship show called Main Street Universe, where they cover several different topics there as well. This is Jessie Ann Nichols George. I want to thank you so much for being here tonight. I look forward to seeing you back here next week as we delve more into activating compassion. Don't forget, if you've enjoyed the show this evening, share it with others. It'll be available at the same link in our archives immediately following the show. And I'll be leaving you with Yearning For, also known as Over and Over by Shemshai. Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you again next week, right here on Activating Compassion in the Midnight Hour. May you enjoy the rest of your weekend and have an amazing week.
And if I could see what makes me blind, I would soar to the edge of my mind, and to touch what seems unreal, just to show you the way that I feel. And we are in time with time, one with the season of change inside. And we are in tune with the tune, caught in a balance of sun and moon. Oh, deep inside, the light within, shining to show you it's here to begin. When all I have is all I need, I will soar to the edge of eternity. And we see it eye to eye, one within love to be for the divine. And we're walking hand in hand, caught in the balance of God and man. Over and over, life is your lover, learning to walk just a little bit slower. discover the essence within the most beautiful lover. Time is still turning, the love is still burning. Deep in your spirit, your heart is still yearning for. Yearning for. When all we have is all we need, all that we ask for shall be received. And we see in eye to eye, one within love before the divine. And we're walking hand in hand, caught in the balance of God and man. And we are in time with time, one with the season of change inside. And we are in tune with the tune of life in the circle and love in bloom. Over and over, life is your lover, learning to walk just